We have tried the online streaming. We're not raking them in with that right now. We've got 2 people here and here. So we're hoping, we are hoping for more. And you know what, maybe the word gets out there next year, we get a few, as opposed to coming here. Welcome to the 2020-21 budget. I know pretty much everyone in the room. My name is John Zilke, that's Brent Roush. I'm going to be doing the first half of the presentation. I'll go walk through some numbers with you, look at our strategic plan. Brent's going to be doing the budget numbers with you. So from slide 26 on, he'll take over to the end. At any point, you can ask us questions, stop us, and of course, at the end, comments, questions, if there's something you're unclear. We'll try and be as succinct as possible. I'm not going to read slides. I'm a big believer. If you got a PowerPoint, you guys have them all in front of you, so you all can read. So I'm not going to read everything. So I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. But if there's one you go, hey, what does that mean? Throw up your hand, and by all means, I will answer it as best as I can. Courtney's going to be doing that for me, so I'm going to give you the nod, and we'll get going.
It just shows you how confident we were in Zoom today. Maybe Brent was just going to throw it in like it was. We wouldn't normally support them, but for the first time, we had a big rush on the screen. Make sure that
we got the expert here. We got the expert here. Okay, our vision and mission. Vision, ready to succeed. Mission of Swan Valley School Division to create an inspiring learning community where all belong, contribute, and succeed. We talked about this as a board. We'll be looking at a new strategic plan. We like this. Look at that, we're booming them in. We like this as a strategic plan, so we're going to probably continue using this. I know the last board 3 years ago looked at a couple different things, it took some time, but this will be carryover. I think it really focuses well on Swan Valley. The aims, again, offer programs which provide relevant and meaningful education, foster excellence, promote tolerance, mutual respect, utilize technology, focus on lifelong learning, and foster such cooperative partnership and level of communication between school and community. Some numbers for you. Now, Trustee Rooks found an issue with this slide right at the bat when she looked at it, so I will point out there is an issue with this one. If you go to September 2016, the number is a little bit skewed there because of the bottom number. You'll see how many kindergarten we had. That one includes junior kindergarten. So it's 103 plus 50 for that year. So that's why you'll see that there's that 153 kids in kindergarten. We didn't lose 50 kids in 1 year in kindergarten. That did not happen. So that's the skew there. You'll notice though a trend, and not a good trend, right? 1485, 65, 41, and 16. I will be giving you in a couple slides down the road what our preliminary numbers are for next year. And there are, while not booming, there is something positive with it. Sorry, Courtney, no, that's okay. We'll go to this, we'll get to that old one. So here's your 10-year trend. So you can see the enrollment of Swan Valley School Division over the last 10 years. You can see there are some positive blips, but it's a general trend down, with 14-16 being the lowest amount we've had so far this year. So this year, currently we're 14-16. Go ahead, Courtney. Here's some positive trends. A small positive, then we'll get to probably a bigger positive. If you look at kindergarten, you're always watching your kindergarten kids, right? Because those are the feeders moving up. You want that number, and I've learned that just watching Swan Valley's numbers, to be over 100. Over 100, you can sustain that, right, throughout the years. Right now, we're at 95. So it's better. Last year, if you'll notice, was a bit of a down year for us at 89. So we're stabilized a bit at 95. You'll notice 106, 93, it's going to bounce. But for me personally, I just picked that number. Anything over 100 would be a positive. So as I said, it's better than 89. And that's why you'll notice the drop this year was almost all in kindergarten from last year. That's where we lost their students. You can look at the different schools. You'll see the projections and what we've got projected for next year. Please remember those are projections. I've asked principals to give me numbers in January, right? That's a whole 9 months away from when the actual school comes in September. Things change. I've already had a principal comment to me, hey, I think there's going to be a few more kids here. And it works both ways. There's sometimes a few less the other direction as well. So those are just projections. Here's the somewhat positive news. Now, I'm not going to try and sell it as it's fantastic, blow your socks off news, but it's stabilizing. 14-16 is what we had last year. 14-16 is what we're projecting next year. If you look at the numbers in terms of the schools, none of them are going down dramatically. There's a few going down from previous slides, but they're all pretty consistent. Some go up a bit, some go down. So there's some stabilization there. You look at the grades at the bottom, that's pretty key. You're going to want to look at the bottom in terms of our numbers because you can see kind of projections throughout the years. So when we mentioned the 95 and K, 92 and so on. So you can see our bigger years. Now, obviously our high school is going to have the bigger years, right? Because we get some First Nations people revenue that comes in and works with us as well. All right. I'm going to talk probably for the next 5-10 minutes about our 5 priorities. And then, as I said, I'm going to switch over to Brent. And I'll talk a bit about some of the budget things we're going to add. Brent's going to talk about the numbers, and I'll talk a bit more at the end. Strategic plan. 5 key things that this group decided 3 years ago: sustainability of human resources, programming for success, cultural inclusiveness, maximize resources, and health and well-being. Okay, first one. Sustainability of human resources. So again, 3 years ago, the Swan Valley School Division sat down with the stakeholders to determine these 3 goals for sustainability of human resources. They want the Swan Valley School Division a very desirable place to work, create succession plans, and partner with universities and training institutions to increase mentorship, apprenticeship, student-teacher placements. The next couple slides, we're going to show you how we think we've done. These will be over the last 3 years. So I've done them in order. I've kept some of the work that Mr. Mendel and the board did the last 3 years, and I've added to the end. So I'm really going to focus on what we've done at the end, because that's kind of what we touched on this year. So again, the majority of this was done in the first 2 years by the board and Mr. Mendel, the work you guys all did together. So I'm not going to go through it all. I'll give it a couple seconds here for you to take a look. And as I said, you have it in front of you, those here, but I know not the people at home don't have it. Are we recording this one? So just as a side note, it will be recorded and we will put it up on our website. So if you see a superintendent talking too fast and you missed the word he said, you can go to your website and you can hear it again. All right, the last part of human resources results. I am going to touch on probably the last 4 or 5 here. Thanks to Trustee Real, reached out to St. Boniface, French immersion student teachers in 2019-2020. We were able to get 2 student teachers to work with the Cole School. They're coming back after spring break. We've got some places for them to stay. We are really pushing hard in St. Boniface. We've talked to them about getting a second-year teacher. A second-year teacher would come almost all year. They'd be with us from September to the end of March. So we're pushing to try and get a student teacher in that regard. The challenge with that is they have classes on Fridays. So we're working, hoping they'll do it online or let us have them do it online. That would be fantastic. We get a French immersion teacher to student teach. The 2 that we had, if you get a chance to meet them, fantastic folks. We're having them again in April. They're really good and they really enjoyed their experience. Not only are French immersion though student teachers, we've also had student teachers from BU and UCN. We were unable to get any from U of M and U of W this year, and someone's pointed out to me that maybe I should be going to our neighbor to the west of it, to be touching on U of Saskatchewan and Regina and doing some work with them. They're both closer than Winnipeg is, right? So it would make sense to hit those 2. Those student teachers are actually coming on Monday. We've got 3 student teachers from BU coming on Monday. Recruitment fairs, those are the 4 we hit this year. We hit U of M, UCN, BU, and St. Boniface. We are trying to figure out something with UCN in Calgary. U of Calgary has an interesting program where they can help you certify teachers, the 2-year program, and it's online. The reason why that's so appealing, right, is if you're an uncertified teacher, you can continue to do that and work on your certificate online. So we've been working with Calgary and UCN on that. Change PD for our principals. And accessibility committee, we've added requests to schools and been updating our standards for accessibility. You'll know that accessibility is different standards, they drop every 2 years. We've been working on that. We have 4 meetings a year with accessibility. We had one 2 days ago. Go ahead, Gordon. Success, programming for success, increased play-based learning, life skills training, and student engagement at the 9 to 12 levels. Again, I'm not going to touch too much. You can all read, and we will be video or recording it. These are the things the boards have done first 2 years. And here's some things specifically this year, we've done a lot of work with UCN. I'll talk more about it in a couple different slides, but we've done a lot of work, and as you well know, UCN has a campus on the SVRSSs, so we've done work with them. ICT pilot, we actually have the teacher of that pilot in the room. We can't have the video to you. It's Mr. Rooks, he's in the room with us. I believe it's gone really well. Yeah, when I was there, for sure, it was working really well, and we've added a digital literacy program as well. So those are the three areas we've done in that. Culture inclusiveness, provide appropriate support to increase literacy and numeracy, culturally appropriate supports to increase literacy and numeracy, and educate students, staff, and the community about the importance of cultural inclusiveness. So in this, you're going to see a lot of work with the treaty training, with the numeracy and literacy, the MRLC, action schools, all that work. We've got a group going next week, and we've got, I think, maybe 3 of them here in terms of the learning sprints with Simon Breakspear, right? I believe, ladies, you guys go Monday and Tuesday next week. You want to switch to the next one, just yeah, I've got those here. We've, I should also highlight the fourth one from down, hired a homeschool liaison for SVRSS. We think that's a key role for our school division to work with our 2 First Nation communities, and it's been going really well. Yeah. But like anything new, it's not perfect, but again, we're getting positive results from that, and it's an outreach program that we think will be successful for us. We're really excited about that, and we're going to continue that for next year. We mentioned the second school, but Benito is going to be joining Hayes, the learning sprints. And we've got numerous staff participating in MRLC. And I should mention, just because she's also in the room, you would think we'd have 50 people in the room at home, when I mentioned to you guys. Numeracy and literacy, the student services role. Patty Hack took on the role of student services. We've added that portion of numeracy and literacy to her role as well. And she has done a really good job with that. She's forming a numeracy and literacy committee all the way. And she's been in my office bugging me about numerous things. I'm pretty happy with the work she's been doing. Maximize resources, effective and efficient use of our infrastructure, equitable access, technology, and of course, increasing student enrollment. These are some of the things, again, that were done the first 2 years. And again, we talked about UCN and the work we continue to work with UCN in a variety of things. I will talk a bit more about them in the next slide here. The Bozeman daycare, you'll notice, Mr. Galloway's here. The work that was done with that, that was completed this fall. The grand opening was in January for the Bozeman daycare. Just some partnerships we have. Again, we have a partnership with UCN in terms of the local business community and the Home Builders program. We have some partnerships in adult education. They've helped sponsor some of the work we're doing in adult ed. We are close to, I did not say we are, we're close to the Minnesota school being sold, we hope. Lofts in the classroom, better alternatives to smart boards. And we have a renewed partnership with Northern Sector Council for 4 years in heavy duty. So those are some of the things that we've done this year in terms of those partnerships that we keep working on. I am going really fast, so if there's any questions, I don't know, let me know. Again, you can come talk to me at the end, but if there's something, just throw your hand up and I'll stop. Health and well-being. Resource schools to ensure health and well-being, develop clear pathways, early identification protocols, and educate all stakeholders, staff, and students on the importance of well-being. Again, I hope you can see that. It's a little bit small. Some of the work that we've done this year is we've gone with a specific division guidance counselor. So we now have 2 division guidance counselors, actually 2.5 for this whole school division. We have a half in Ecole. We have 1 for our K-8, and we have 1 for our 9-12. It's only been since January when we've done that, and I think it's been really positive. In fact, I know it's been a really positive thing for our schools. Professional development on planning for teachers and student success. We really wanted to focus on that. That was one of our PDs on February 4th. Professional development and difficult conversations. What that means is they don't always have to be nasty. It's just working on those conversations when people disagree or when people are trying to work through things or tough things. A lot of that's culture of niceness, if you know what I mean. It's having those conversations so you improve, as opposed to I don't want to hurt your feelings. So we've done a lot of work with principals and with teachers with that. sorry, there's one more I want to focus on. And at the bottom, again, I hope you can see it. We've done, I think, a lot of work in workplace safety and health. We've got an individuals come giving us some help. We're doing a number of policies on that. We worked on some of our policies on violence and harassment to make sure we're up to date with the problems. So we've done a number of work with that. All right, some focuses for next year. And then, you're ready? All right. New strategic plan in April. So we are going to be, we hope to have 63 people, I believe. We've invited all walks of life to the Westwood Inn on April 20th, including students, the RMs, daycares, members of the buses. I'm going to forget people, EAs, trustees, but we're going to have a group working on our strategic plan. Focus on numeracy literacy in the division, developing a focus plan. This is important. Well, it's important to me. It should be important to all of us, but you're also going to hear it's very important to the province. Everything they say is numeracy and literacy. So I think we need to get on board with that. Look for partnerships to establish Swan Valley as a training center for partnering with a variety of partners. I've said these are just three. It can be many, right? I should have put etc. in there. It's not just those three we want partnerships with. Continue to look for efficiencies. We're always doing that. We realize we're a small school division and must continue to do that. The education review, the big elephant in the room, that's coming the end of March. So they've said the end of March. If I was a betting person, I would tell you to mark your calendar for March 27th. I think that's the Friday. Would be just before spring. I think that's when it will come, but that's not gospel. I'm just telling you what I think. So I think it will come on that day. That's going to obviously have a huge impact. It might not have a huge impact for September, but it will start the moment that it's reviewed or it's released. There's going to be changes. So we're going to have to work through those changes. And continue to increase access to counseling and resource services. We've looked at a couple of schools, all of our schools, we see the need for resources and guidance. We've looked at 2 this year that we're going to, without adding to our staffing number, we've kept our staffing number the same as last year, but we're going to divert resources from other areas to put a little bit more resource guidance into Taylor and Hayes School this year. So we'll have a bit more. And just with the education review, we just thought we'd put this slide in just as a reminder. It is coming soon. You can do 1 of 2 things with the education review. I won't lie, every conference you go to, everyone talks about it, everyone's nervous about it. The reality is, let's see what it is and then let's work through it, right? That's all you can do. So let's take it and go with it as opposed to, here it comes. Because I know there's a lot of dread out there. I can tell you, conferences I've been everywhere you go, there's certainly that nervousness about it. But let's see what comes with it. We will work with whatever we get. And I think there's one more. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Roush here, so you can see the numbers. Some directives that have formed our budget. Provincial Guidelines Bill 28. So what that means is our teachers are in year 3 of that. Correct me if I'm wrong in that? Well, 0.75 coming. Yeah, so this year they'll have a 0.75 increase, like in terms of the next year budget year, and the year after that will be a 1% increase based on Bill 28. Reduction of tax incentive grant, change in the general support grant, limit any increase to the special requirement to 2%. So again, that's a directive by the provincial government. The highest we can go with our requirement is 2%. I should have put in here, this is not a slam, but also there's one more. We did receive a reduction of 2%, right, from provincial funding. But there was a reduction given to us by 2% from the provincial government. I'm going to turn it over here. So I will be for questions, obviously, at the end. Is there anything right now? Okay. Mr. Roche.
Thank you. I'm just going to do this so that let's see if this works. All right, so this is a pretty busy slide, so I thought I'd just share a little bit with you to help you understand before we go through. And I'm not going to go live on. So the formula guarantee is part of the formula that came in back in the 2013-14 to assist school divisions who were with declining enrollment, and during a time when they were trying to actually leave divisions at 0%. So if you were other areas of the categorical grants went down, and or your expenditures changed slightly and you lost your equalization at the back end, that was its primary purpose. So it is actually contained in here. These 2 columns are in here. So it's, when you poke through it. So from 2012 to 2013,
We go from here, we're 11.7. Our revenue to school divisions over our core funding remained constant all the way through to 16, 17, and then now we're into 2 years of reductions. During that time frame, though, the formula guarantee, if you take a look, there's some years, had the formula guarantee not been in there, we'd have been looking for over $1 million this particular year. 18, 19, the audited state was 416,000. This year when the budget was, pardon, 19, 20, this time last year when this budget was set, we're looking at 304. And for the current year that we're setting 2021 coming up July 1, it's 505. So when you keep that into perspective, that although there has been challenges within the funding formula, and we do speak of decreases in the last few years, just be mindful that the province is, in effect, is still trying to help school divisions to lessen the impact of changes in reassessment and in your student population. Because it is, if you let the funding formula stay to its core true self, this would have been gone way back in 13, 14. So it's as much as boards have to work within the framework with the dollars that the province has, there is a little bit of assistance there that doesn't always get spoken to. During these times, though, as a result, expenditures inflation, and there has been additional tasks put onto the school board that they're expected to provide services in different ways. So the other is their municipal government. Of course, you can see in retrospect it has increased over that time frame as we work through staying at 0 or less than 0 over the last couple of years. Our cost per pupil, there's a couple things that really have impacted that besides inflation, but also our declining enrollment. And our last 2 years with Birch River School in Tonis, doing some restructuring has gone a long ways, although it may not seem that way because the dividers is dropping. What it has done, and I'll show it on the next slide, has provided the board an opportunity to do take some of that savings in 2021, and you'll be able to identify that shortly. Just go to the next slide. So by this time, I'm sure those who had the advantage of looking at the flipping through in-house here, the complete package before we started would have noticed that we are sitting 2021 budget as proposed is sitting as neutral, 0. Overall revenues are up slightly at 62, but that takes into account of a tax increase to local levy. We are dropping our 2% and a few other things in here, 231 in provincial support, a little bit here in other sources, but it's really some of that relates to a grant called the Apple Schools that's phasing out. When the grant came in, it was the application, it was a 1 full-time position, and it slowly worked its way out to 0. So that's part of that 12, making up that decline of 12. Overall for expenses, they're actually at 67, and then we are cutting out some support. I'll speak to down below for some expenses. But short long is regular instruction, which is primarily most of anything that touches in our classrooms, is down slightly. That's just primarily just in supplies, materials, and making some changes to facilitate a balanced budget. Meanwhile, recognizing there's a 3/4% increase in wages based on Bill 28. And in addition to that, there's the standard increments for those who are young folks are working way through the respective pay scales, whether it's support staff or our professional staff. Student support services ties into a good chunk of that relates to increases in a little bit of some EA hours that we're hoping to be able to sustain when the time comes fall. Community education, that is primarily pre-K support. And in there is 41,000 that the division's already received notification, and we're the banker for the coalition for Better Beginnings, and they've indicated not to plan for anything past September. That being said, we left the funding at the same levels and the expenditures at the same levels, so we're fairly confident there'll be something come in to replace it, and if it doesn't, then we'll accommodate at that point in time as we get once we know. Hopefully by June, the budget's coming out on March the 11th, so the province should be in a position to maybe share that point in time or shortly thereafter is our hope. The services that are provided to pre-K and we have the connections to our daycares is important to the board and to as those young folks facilitate come into kindergarten. So it is a primary for us to keep tabs on. Division administration, pretty straightforward. I just want to mention there are items within the division administration which are actually connected and tied more directly to other areas. But right now, Frame, which was set up back in, I'm guessing, in the 70s, has some of those expenses to the division office. And I suspect a lot of it had to do, back then, the computers, I know when I started in Division 1987, it was kind of almost like keying into cards, and you would fire the stuff into Winnipeg, all our accounting transactions, and then you wait, and it was eventually would arrive on the bus, and you're all excited, especially if it bounced. So that goes back to 87. So the next, instructional and other support services, that's your libraries. Your PD is in there, a little bit of other items. We also have in our division, there's a tiny little bit for curriculum, and that's me. Our superintendent is also responsible for curriculum. I realize now with Patty, we take some of that role, but historically, that's always been the superintendent's task as well. Transportation, self-explanatory, and operations. With the cost of diesel fuel load, it was up for a while, then it's back down. We made a decision not really to we're trying to work within the dollars that we have to make everything work. And our goal was trying to keep expenses as close as we could to get to zero, but just under 0.29 of 1% is where it's at as far as overall. Fiscal is primarily payroll tax. There's a little bit in there for bank fees. We do through to give the students here an opportunity to have exposure and learn about the debit machines. We have a debit machine here in the culinary arts area, and also in marketing, District of Ed. And the two units do come with a pretty hefty price, even though they are heavily discounted by the TD Bank. The clearinghouses that all the banks cooperatively have do charge a fair amount of dollars. So but primarily most of that 342.99% of it is payroll tax. So we pay payroll tax, and over the last few years, the province has started to cut back with their return to school divisions. And for 2021, they're keeping, I think it's like $2 to $3 million that they're keeping back, and they're going to be announcing an initiative what they're doing with it rather than returning it to school divisions to support the payroll tax. Any questions on that before? And there's the slides go forward that break some of this stuff down. Not? All right, perfect. So this slide just puts everything in a little slightly different perspective, but more of a focus on our local special levy. So the special requirement is a calculation that takes a look at the 2020 and the 2021 calendar year, comes up with the municipal, the education property tax credit. It's projected to be a small increase even, and then when you come down the tax incentive grant and the guarantee, which is in there, there was just too much to put in, it gets too busy. It's dropping, and it will continue to drop. Our division is under the 2%, is actually under a guarantee portion. So we're not getting the tax incentive grant reduction that others are receiving across the province. For us, it's about $20,000 a year that gets cut, and where it immediately goes on to the levy. That has no control onto the board. And other divisions who are growing and were party to the tax incentive grant, the province's plan was actually to reduce it to zero over 6 years. I think that's what I was working. So some of them are seeing quite a large increase to their local levy, which prior to that, the taxpayers enjoyed the relief, which now is difficult for the local province to sustain, and that's really where this is coming from. So for us, there's $20,293 that a part of our levy increase for this year that reflects that. But just be mindful that we're still being subsidized by $994,000. So be thankful, we're fortunate for what we have. Other school divisions, primarily that's Frontier. So we are expecting a small increase in students moving down First Nations. We are, based on the current year that we're in and the strong enrollment, we're projecting that to go into next year. Private and others is Saskatchewan tuition, culinary arts, and marketing makes up the bulk of these dollars, and there's expenditures on the other side. Other sources, a little bit of interest, and then we've got some comment for teacher rate salaries that are in there, that and transportation, a little bit in maintenance that makes up most of that $189,000. Salaries strictly across the whole division, continuing with everything that's mentioned earlier about increments and et cetera, a small increase and hopefully that works out. Benefits up slightly. We do have CVP, as most people know, is the federal government has made some changes to hopefully betterments for CVP in time to come, but a lot means we're all paying more for all of our paycheck and matched by the employer. Services, that's mostly like utilities. We have software that you don't own that fits into there. But that's, and some other maintenance, I should mention. Most of your under frame, a lot of the maintenance that we do, even though it's our own forces, whether it be in transportation and your work within our buildings, all it shows up as services. It's just how the legislation, how the frame requirements are. Supplies, material, and equipment. A good chunk of that is school-based, and then that's where our utilities go into to cover off of some of our utilities. Both of them, most good chunk is here. Fiscal capital transfers there again. That's just primarily payroll tax and some additional fees and banking that fit in there. The total expenditures is over $21.4 million, or up 62,000. We just put in for so that people, that's usually what most people in the years prior are interested. So our principals, teachers, clinicians, for this budget year, it's 114.28. Last year was 113.5. So up 0.78, but there is a small, like I said, there is about a half, there is exactly 0.5 of that is a comment by the local teachers association to do tasks and things that they want to get done. So it's revenues up here, expenditures on here, but we still have to include it in on all our stats on our abuse transparent. The next page. This is a bit of a busy one again. I just want to focus on, for this year, the board has decided, taking into account the economy and many things that are impacting our valley. Plus, the province as a whole has come out and indicated the preference that it's not a directive, but they did like to see is school divisions, if you could do something to subsidize your local mill rate, and that's what's taking place. So we're taking some money out of our accumulated surplus, and that's split actually over 2 fiscal years to reduce it. So if we bring our levy increase down to 1.252%, without it, it would have been 2.5. So our goal was to keep it well below inflation, and that's where we're at with that. Next slide. This bit of a pictorial, won't spend much time on it because you've had a chance to look at it, but really it just shows our provincial revenue is 65.8%. As most know, that makes up the bulk of our dollars. Our local levy at 30.8, and if you're wondering why this shows 6.6 million for special requirements here, and you'll see it on all our documents when the budget, if it's approved as this is draft is, because of how the frame and everything works. We come down here when the financial statement is actually done. So back in June 30th of 2021, the net municipality revenue will show 6.5 million. That's when we can make the change. But until then, it's 6.6. Next slide. The breakdown of our costs, regular instruction, which makes up 54.7%. And if you go to student services, 99.99% of this, 17.71, is directly to provide services to those students in the classroom in regular instruction. So there's a direct correlation. The rest of it, operations and maintenance, makes up 11.5%. One of the things we do have, comparison to talk to other school divisions, in particular when you're talking to the Public School Science Board, which provides the funding for our larger projects when we're fortunate enough to get, whether it be for larger repairs or actual physical structures, we'll say is they can't get over the additional costs associated with trying to do something in Swan or Valley in relation to other parts of the province. Some of it has to do with primarily when you're talking to the some of the contractors and specialties. When they arrive here, they do the work. It's tough for them to find another job to tie it in the to or from. Usually it seems like the big cutoff seems to be Dauphin, Russell area, and after that we seem to have to pay quite a premium for getting work done. When you get into transportation, just the geographically size of our division makes up 8.74%. Division administration 3.58, and that includes some of the costs that we're allowed to, it has to stay there, but then we do get a bit of a credit for it, which brings us down within our, because we are within the designated directive of administrative cap, we're at 3.4%. So all the liability insurance lower 30 $34,000. It stays here as an expense in our division administration. But if you take a look at our financial statement, you go to the it's an exciting document. If you go to the back end of it, it shows the total expenses for division administration as it relates to function 500. And then it gives us credit for what we pay for premiums for insurance. And then the net is usually around that 3.4% as far as overall. Next slide. And as we're aware, we are a service industry, so most of our expenses are salaries and benefits. And I'll leave that to read at your leisure. I don't want to spend all night going through every slide by detail. Next slide, please. Just a bit of a comparison. And this is for 1920, the current fiscal year that we're in today. The other data is obviously won't be published till about January or so, February. Actually, it's some of they usually like to keep it for quite a while. Operating fund, when you take a look for cost per pupil, provincial average is 13.3 versus ours at 15.4. Some of that makes up, I'm going to go through all, which will help explain some of the items here. For us, regular instruction, the difference, some of it relates to just the cost of doing business here. Our vocational technical programming that we provide, where a lot of other areas don't have access to that as students across the province, makes up a big chunk of it. A little bit with French immersion, and just like I said earlier, just the cost of doing business here. And our divisor as well. As we shrink, our core operating costs don't change as significantly as we'd like them to, so that impacts as well. Student services, we're very close to the provincial average as far as per student cost per pupil. Community ed, that's back in your pre-K, just a matter of us at 0.3 versus 0.9. Division administration at 441. We're setting the budget was set at 560. It'll likely be closer. Don't quote me, I'm guessing probably about 519-ish when the year is done. I'm hoping for. Instructional other supports, there again, as I mentioned earlier, that's PD, your library areas, and a few other odds and ends in there. So had we had the capacity to have a curriculum person and actual staff in there, you would see this number rise, and that's one of the primary differences between why we're below the provincial average. Transportation, provincially at 591, just our geography and what we have to do here. We're at 1384, and there again, as far as maintenance goes, there's quite a variance throughout the province on just the core maintenance that divisions do, and so that's part of it. And the other part of this, it is there again a per pupil calculation, and with our square footage and the areas that we're trying to serve does bring that cost up. And then there again, fiscal. 248, that's primarily our cost per payroll tax per student. Next slide. Next one, just a little easier, just a little different caption. This takes a look at a bit of a comparison. We're at 15,411. For 2019-20 budget, the way it sits right now, it'll be 15,550. So there is a slight increase with regards to cost per pupil. Our pupil educator ratio, we're slightly below the provincial average. So this takes into account teachers, principals, and your student service coordinator. So you understand. And the difference strictly here is this teacher in the classroom direct services to the students, and we're at 15.1 versus 16.8, which does make a contributing difference to the provincial average here as well. Up. Direct supports the pupils. Provincial average was 78.8. We're at 74.2. And the difference is attributed to, like I said mentioned earlier, some of our geographic costs that others don't experience, and our overhead in relation to our total structure that we have that we're maintaining, although we should, as soon as we actually get to sell, once Minnetonka's finds a new owner for Minnetonka, soon we're going to be putting out to market Birch River School. So when those two buildings leave, that'll go a long ways to help as well. It's not going to make a massive difference to this number, but it will make a difference in relation to we'll be able to shed off the utility costs associated with those buildings. And Birch River is one that's a bit expensive to run because it's an electric boiler there. Now that's not a very good way to speak if you're trying to sell it. For 2019 middle rate, we're fairly consistent. We're flat up. But one thing I will say, it's very over the many years that I've been fortunate to be with the division, we've either been at par, slightly below, or just a tiny bit above we've never broke any trail to be way up here in comparison to the provincial average. And the other way, much the same, which has been pretty close to dead on average or slightly or below or above. Next slide. This I'll spend a little bit more time on down into here. The 2020, as most people know, is a reassessment year. And we are going to see a shift in taxation. It's leaving residential, and no surprise, hitting farmland because of the cost of rising prices paid for farmland. And we are seeing a decrease in commercial as well. And I didn't have a chance really to phone assessment branch to dig in a little bit on 33,000 as to how much that relates to businesses that may have contracted that much, or it's just related to some of it has to do, I know, with some of this assessment for commercial also relates to machinery and equipment that's happening both out at LP has a big influence. Service products has a big influence. Our hotels actually and their occupancy over a year will impact the changes in assessment as well. Or at least that's fairly consistent year prior. So I like I said, I didn't contact them to see the change here. So our total levy of 99,000 is what's being projected to propose. That is net of the $100,000 subsidy. And of that 99,000, 20,000 of that is the tax incentive grant guarantee that's being phased out. Next slide. Just to get a bit of a sense, and I want to point out this is estimate. I did not track down some of these exact. I used to have the actual locations of these, but I misplaced the farmland and I didn't want to bug assessment when they were busy. So what I did do is I took the overall average, which the data I had in the Swan Valley West and near Swan River, which pretty much Swan Valley West, there's my memory, and applied the average to it increase. So on that average increase for all the farmland from 2019 to 2020, you're going to see, in theory, $16.97 per quarter, and that's straight farmland, no buildings. And on this one, $28.66. For a residence, that's not saying it's going to happen, but if you had a residence that made no changes between the 2018 2020 assessment, you didn't make an addition, you didn't do a major benefit which triggered additional assessment, you may see a small decrease. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but you may, because it's all going to be dependent on your actual piece of property. And for easy figuring, for every $100,000 assessment, it's $1.56, and that may not necessarily be reflected across the whole division. Because when you come down to here, municipality mentions Bozeman. When you take a look, the 2019 levy was a little over $2 million. You're at 27,000. They're $2,056,000. Swan Valley West, we'll see a slightly change of $3,825. The town of Swan River is going down 16. Arm amount, and it's primarily farmland. That's really changed, game changer for them. They're picking up 24.9 or $82,000 of this 99,000. So that's really, it's this municipality that's going to see a big shift or change for 2020. Overall mill rate 12.857, but be mindful that we did have a reassessment here, and versus 13.82, so a decline of just under a 1 mil. And that does reflect the 100,000 that the board's subsidizing. Next slide. Questions, comments? All right. Any questions?
Just a question about transportation, because it's always been a really high cost in our area, and we all want our kids to be safe, and we've got big distances to travel. But I wonder if, does the government cover all that, like knowing that we are well over double the provincial average? Do they pay for all of that, or do we have to pull from other places in order to cover it, such as municipal amounts that we get, the revenue we get from other places to cover that cost? Are they able to like up it because of our cost?
Just for the benefit of the person still on. The question that was asked was transportation. How is it funded by the province of Manitoba, recognizing that our costs, because of our geography of our division, we have additional costs that others may not experience in relation to transportation. Their funding formula, in the funding formula, it does make a small allowance for divisions such as ours, but not enough that's needed to support the variance, the difference. So it would become from our local tax base, or you're looking at, primarily it's a local tax base, or you're looking at borrowing it from other sections of the funding plan.
So just to be clear, it's not, what they send us is not covering our total cost.
Correct.
So if they go to take away that taxation piece, maybe that's something that could be looked at to have them cover the full cost of getting students to school instead of pulling it from other places.
Yeah, when they do, it'll be a major funding formula change and adjustments coming forward. Yes, when that time comes out.
Thank you.
Questions will come up here, so you don't.
Yeah. Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm Hayden Robeson. I'm here representing the SVTA as the collective bargaining chair, and I've got a couple of questions. In your presentation, you talked about administration costs, and I know the province asked us to reduce by 15%, and I noticed that we are well above the provincial average, and I just wondered if you could comment on your plans and what you're kind of planning to do to work with that request.
So we have until, if you saw what the provincial said, until September 1st. So we've actually put an appeal into the province based on that. And our costs are high divisional admin based on our small enrollment, right? It's the same as a lot of the other costs. That's why you'll notice they're 3.0 is 4%, so they're relatively low. We are going to look at that request first from the government. If they get back to us with a positive, then we won't have to do anything. If they look at us and say, no, you must continue, then the board will make a decision this spring in terms of what to do with that 15%. So yeah, we did not talk about it here just because we want to wait till the education review. We want to wait to our appeal.
Yeah, thank you. There's so many questions that are hard to answer with the review looming near, getting closer every day. I'd like to share a little information that puts a context on the Swan Valley School Division. Oftentimes we get compared to the rural south. But if you compare us to our closest neighbors to the north, the Kelsey School Division, you'll find that our salaries are currently nearly 5% below. And I also want you to know that currently in the Swan Valley School Division, we are nearly 10% of our staff as unqualified teachers now, and it's continually rising. The impact that that has in the classroom is hard to measure, but it definitely has an impact on overall learning. Currently, the Swan Valley School Division ranks 32nd out of 38 school divisions in terms of salaries. And I think that this has an impact on our ability to attract teachers to our area. Our nearest neighbor that uses the same substitute teacher pool as Good Spirit School Division, currently they pay 66% more per day for their substitute teachers. Our current rate is $155 per day, and they pay $457. Currently, we lose subs to that school division. So given all that information and given Bill 28, that by the way is not in effect and is not constitutional, given that we're currently awaiting a judge's decision and currently awaiting binding arbitration decisions that should come this month, I'm wondering if you could comment on any considerations that you've made in your budget to potentially have increases to meet demands, given that Bill 28 does never take effect, and given that we have some catching up to do in order to become competitive and start attracting teachers and have competitive salaries in the Swan Valley School Division. Another key piece of information is just on March 3rd, the Minister of Education announced in his mandate letter that there will be province-wide bargaining. That is going to happen. And what impact that has on the Swan Valley School Division when we currently sit 32nd out of 38 in our budget. Winnipeg School Division is looking to raise their property taxes by 2.9%. In this presentation, we learned that we are looking at 1.25%. And so as part of that response, I'm wondering if you could comment on your consideration of potentially raising property taxes near the maximum level of 2%, or what other considerations you might make to try to meet those challenges?
I might have to go back to you for questions.
Yeah, okay.
So you did say the mandate later, and you're absolutely correct about the provincial bargaining, right? So that's probably gonna happen sooner than later with the wages. So if we are at 32, chances are we're gonna be moving up with that. Saskatchewan, 100% right. That's a whole across the board. That's not a Swan Valley thing. I agree. The substitute wages were at what, 160? Was it 160? Yeah, compared. Exact same issue I had Hayden in Park West. We were losing people to across the board all the time because their substitutes just pay that. And I don't have an easy answer for you for that. We could magically switch that, but then we got to look where else to change. Right? We have to look at else. You're right. I said Bill 28 was mandated. It is not. It is in the courts right now, and there's a chance it goes either way. If it goes the other regard, we would of course appeal to the government and say, well, wait a second, you told us to do this, so what are we going to do with that now? If that wasn't the case, then we'd have to look for other avenues. That's the fact. I need you to remind me what else you asked me though, because there's a couple other things.
Yeah, another thing I commented on was that the province talks about 2% as being a maximum level that they'd like to see the property taxes raised. And I was surprised to see 1.25% given all those challenges and where we sit.
Yeah. So we did go 2% on our special requirement. We went as high as we possibly could, Hayden.
Okay.
Yeah, but what we did is we subsidized it by taking some of our surplus money to make it lower for the taxpayer. So we went as high as we could go, but in one of Brent's slide, he talked about the 100,000. We put that in to make the number go down for the taxpayer from 2.5% to 1.25. So that's why that number is a little bit lower than maybe what you heard from Winnipeg School.
Right, yeah, I just maybe misunderstood.
I'm sorry, no, I didn't dwell on it, but one of the things that the province had mentioned, if I neglected to mention it, was the province, I believe it is, but I didn't, the province did ask school divisions that if you had more than $1, I guess, in your accumulated nominal surplus, you were expected to, they asked, you weren't expected, they asked to give consideration to subsidize the mill rate or do something with your budget to support it with your accumulated surplus rather than transferring it over to the ratepayer and or maybe help, hopefully, not necessarily reduce services to the students in the classroom. So that's kind of where that came from. With regards to what's in our budget, the other request that's been to school divisions by the province is not to include any allowances or any settlements within your budget allocations. So that's what we follow. That includes our year ending June of 2019. There's no wage accruals in there. We're probably school divisions were following what they were told today.
The only other comment I would, because I know you talked about uncertified teachers, you're right, we do have some within division. I don't think it's 15%. So yeah, it is just, yeah, it is. It's, I count us at 6 right now, I think is what I had. It doesn't matter. So it is around what you're saying. So we're always looking at that. That's the whole point of that View of Calgary programs, to try and get some of those uncertified certified. And as you know, that will take a year or two to do that. Okay. I hope I answered them all.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Anybody else, folks? Okay, we will say goodbye to our 1,000 people on the live stream, and we'll